Are you looking for a new football news app? I can't lie, that's a very odd thing to just say in normal conversation, but I mean, then you've got to make sure to check out One Football down in the description below for all of your news, whether you're a Barca fan, Liverpool fan, or an Alfreton. I don't know if it has them, I'm not gonna lie. Just download it anyway. So, hello there everyone, and welcome, it is Niran here, and today it is time for me to bring you 10 realistic things in FIFA 19 career mode. Now I know, that sounds like quite a lot of things, and in fairness to EA, there are actually a decent chunk of things that are realistic in career mode. Can't lie, it did take me a little while to come up with these ideas. If you're going to enjoy the video, slap a like on it, and of course subscribe if you are new to the channel. It's the big red button under the video, and it really helps me out as we're pushing towards 100,000 subscribers. Can we actually do it before the end of the year? If it does, my mind will actually explode as to how that is even a possibility. Anyway, enough about that. It's time to get on to the topics. First of all, we have got cup shocks. Now, this is relatively speaking, in comparison to how scripted normal sim games are, I'm actually very impressed at the fact that cup shocks even happen at all. Like, I've genuinely seen Brentford win the League Cup. I've seen championship teams or League One teams beat Premier League sides, and that does happen in real life, but with how scripted the simming system is on career mode with your own team when it comes to how good the opposition are, or whether you're away from home or at home, or whatever the situation, it is actually quite impressive that we get these cup shocks like we've had in the FA Cup over the years. I mean, flipping Lincoln City getting to, what, the semi-finals or something of the FA Cup was ridiculous. The only thing I don't tend to see is a League 2 team ever beating a Premier League team. I don't think I've ever seen that happen, but maybe having that would be quite nice as well, but I mean, it is what it is. At least we get some cup shocks. Now, point number 2, we've got transfer fees and values. I actually think EA have nailed on transfer values this year. The only thing I would say is that certain players just shouldn't be buyable. Realistically, Lionel Messi is not worth, whatever, £173 million. You can't put a price tag on Lionel Messi, but with pretty much anyone else, I think they've nailed it. People like Dybala being worth like 220 mil, or Neymar being worth £250 million, I think it's pretty much nailed on in today's market, so I think they've actually done well with that. Lower rated players cost a little bit more than they used to, which is obviously more difficult for a road to glory, but the whole point of a road to glory is that it is difficult, so it's nice to see that young players with high potentials are still actually quite expensive in comparison to just being like £500,000 like they would have been on previous FIFAs. That doesn't mean other aspects of transfer situations aren't unrealistic. The whole trade deal situation is unrealistic. The fact that you can sign pretty much any player you want to for any team that you want to is unrealistic. The fact that you can sign anyone on a pre-contract agreement is unrealistic, but at least the transfer values are good. That is what I will say. Keep them as realistic as they are right now, EA. Next up, we've got growth for young players. Now, obviously, again, I still think it should be based on performance, but the actual pace of increase is good. Basically, when a 16-year-old comes out of the youth academy, the actual rate at which they go up in overall, according to their potential, is pretty good. That's what I will say. Decrease-wise, not so great. That needs some work, but the actual pace at which young players grow, I think, is quite good. You compare it to something like FIFA 11 or FIFA 12, where players just did not go up in overall. Like, the most growth you would get out of anyone was +2 in a season, and even that was a miracle. So, to have players going up by +6 or +7, if they've got a high potential in one season, is nice to see. It does make it easier for your youth academy players to actually have an instant impact on the squad, rather than having to be sat on the sidelines for 4 seasons in a row before they're even remotely useful. Transfer budgets are another one which have been improved drastically going forward from FIFA 18 especially. I mean, really, apart from FIFA 18, transfer budgets have always been pretty good, but last year, they were absolutely abysmal. Like, you could win the league and get a transfer budget of £6 million for next season, and it would just ruin career mode saves. Now, they've implemented a system where, based on your manager rating or how well you did in the last season, and based on prize money too, you get a budget increase. So if you don't do too well, you don't get all that much, but if you do really well, you get a ridiculous amount of money added on. Now, in some instances, it is a little bit too much, to be honest, but at the same time, you would get a lot of money from winning a league. You would have a lot of surplus cash to spend on players if you won the Premier League, for example. So I like it. I like it a lot more than FIFA 18, and it's certainly a lot more realistic than it was on last year's game. Number 5, board objectives, minus Youth Academy board objectives. We've already talked about those before, but in my opinion, pretty much any other board objective is actually quite realistic. I mean, stuff like brand exposure, we don't really look at all that often, but I would say they're still realistic goals. And when it comes to domestic and continental success especially, I think the board actually do take on board, without the pun being intended, the actual rating of your team. So if you've got a terrible team that's just been promoted into the Premier League, your objective will be to keep them in the Premier League. It won't be just go out and get in the Europa League straight away or something. It does really take into account the quality of your side, and it also disregards to an extent what you did the previous season as well, which is quite an interesting one that I suppose could be taken from 2 different angles. Obviously, if you got in the Europa League last season, naturally the board should expect you to get in the Europa League again. But if it was just a fluke and your team is not that great and should only be fighting for survival, like, you know, maybe Leicester, for example, when they won the Premier League, the board will take that into account and will give you more the benefit of the doubt in case you don't get into the Champions League or Europa League again for a second season. It is really based on the quality of your side, which inevitably makes it more realistic. So I do like the board objectives this year. Number 7 is more gameplay related. The AI attacking at the end of games is improved drastically at the moment. I know it was alright on FIFA 18, but it feels a lot better on FIFA 19 and a lot more realistic. I'll paint a picture for you. FIFA 16 and FIFA 17, you could genuinely score about 3 extra goals in the final 15 minutes of games because the AI would chuck absolutely everybody forward and completely disregard their defense. And I know, to an extent, when you're losing a game, you've got nothing to lose, you might as well pump everybody long, but it was too much. But you'd genuinely have a situation where you'd have like 3 players up against 1 or 3 players up against the opposition goalkeeper, and it just made no sense. Like, you'd still have a defender back, or you'd still, I don't know, it was just too, and it was too easy as well. It wasn't realistic, and it also made things too easy because if you were winning in the final 15 minutes of the game, you just weren't going to concede because they just pumped the ball long, all their defenders will be up in attack, and you just run up the other end and score a tap-in. It'll be more of a challenge rather than just loads of bodies in the box and then just pumping it long. They'll actually play well and really test you in the final 10 minutes of games, like you would get in real life. You have that feeling when you're 1 goal up and your opposition are putting everything forward, throwing the kitchen sink at you. It's not a situation of, oh yeah, we could just easily get the ball now and go up the other end and score. That does happen sometimes, for sure, but not every single game like it used to be, and it certainly doesn't happen very often on FIFA 19, which I like. Next up, transfers are pretty much always different, and I know there are a couple of scripted transfers, and I mean a few. I know people put it in the comment section as, oh yeah, Jamie Vardy always leaves in Season 1, or Mario Balotelli always signs for someone, and that is true, that does usually happen, but it's never usually the same team. The only scripted transfer I can think of that pretty much happens every single time is Nabil Fekir signing for Manchester City. I don't know why that's the case, but it happens every time for some reason. So I like the fact that realistically all career modes are kind of different because each team has a different set of players. There are very, very few scripted transfers, and that's realistic. You know, you don't have different game saves going on in real life, but it's nice that there's that mix-up of different transfers that can happen. Number 8, the amount of bids you get for players is really, really good. Like, if you've got a player up for sale, you will get a lot of bids for them. If you've got a player in excellent form, you will get a lot of bids for them, and I like that. FIFA 18, again, was so negative in this sense. You'd have to sell a player, you'd have to have a player on the transfer list for at least a year before you were able to sell them. Obviously, you do still have the situation of transfer talks breaking down. That's because the teams that are bidding are stupid, but at least you get more bids. You get a realistic amount of interest for your players. Even if they aren't transfer listed, you know, you still get that interest if they're in good form, and I think that is quite realistic as well from the AI. The frequency of good youth academy players is another thing I want to talk about. A lot of people say this is a little bit too overpowered. If you think it's too overpowered, then obviously use lower rated scouts, but in my opinion, even with 5-star scouts, you know, you're paying 3-odd million, £4 million for a good scout. You should be getting good youth academy players in return. Often, you know, you have, you know, 194 max potential youth academy player per scout report, and I think that's quite good, because over the course of the season, that means you can pretty much build a full team of youth academy players, like 16 or 18. You would always have a full team of 16 or 18 youth academy players in your youth academy in real life, so I don't really see what the problem is with that. Maybe it's a tiny bit overpowered, but I certainly think it's relatively realistic, and more realistic than in previous games. And then finally, I won't talk about it in too much depth because it's something I've talked about a lot on this channel in the past, but the fact your badges and fonts change when you're promoted or relegated or in cup competition is really, really nice. If you're in the Champions League or the Europa League one, you get that badge on your sleeve. If you've won the Champions League, you get the Champions League logo with a number in the middle of it, so it can tell other opposition how many times you've won that competition. And if you get promoted from the Championship to the Premier League, you get the Premier League branding as well. It's been something that's been missing and very unrealistic and just generally frustrating in previous FIFA, so the fact that EA have fixed that going into this year's career mode is a positive sign. That though rounds up 10 realistic things, in my opinion, in FIFA 19 career mode, and they're all things that I hope will remain in career mode going forward. If you've got any more that I missed, drop them down in the comment section below. But if you enjoyed this video, slap a like on it and subscribe if you're new to the channel. As I mentioned, it's the big red button under the video and it massively helps me out. And once again, we're pushing towards 100k, man, by the end of the year. That is genuinely ridiculous to think about. You can also follow me on social media these days too. My Twitter and Insta are at @theofficialfng and links are down below. But it's been a pleasure ranting at you guys today. Have a great day, enjoy yourselves, and goodbye.
Yeah, you universe, no lie.